Okay, hello YouTube. Today we're going to be discussing the Petrovs defense, and more specifically after e4, e5, knight f3, knight f6, knight takes e5, d6. I'm actually going to be discussing a gambit that you can try, just kind of depending on what mood you're in. It's a gambit called the Cochrane gambit. So if you like content like this and you want to see more of it, hit that subscribe button, click on the notification icon. So what in the world is this move, knight takes f7, and is it like remotely sound? Is it reasonable? Well, it's a fairly reasonable move in the sense that a lot of top level GMs have actually tried this move. It's a move that I think at least is somewhat fundamentally sound. It's a little questionable, but I mean, if you just look at it from a basic positional perspective, after knight f7, king f7, we have more central pawns than black. We have two pawns for the piece, and black's king position is, of course, not very good. So on some sort of fundamental level, these things should even out. And of course, there is the massive potential for white to get a huge advantage in these positions. Like if he can manage to play d4, f4, and e5 and just take over the center of the board, of course, that would be devastating. So there's kind of two main moves here. Now, when I learned about the Cochrane Gambit when I was a kid, the grandmaster that showed it to me, which I think was Gregory Serper, he just kind of offhand just said, "Oh yeah, I know. We just," he said, "I don't know much about the theory, but we just play knight c3 here, and the position is unclear." And of course, I didn't know a whole lot about the theory back then either. But of course, my understanding is that they were all shying away from this move d4. And d4 is kind of it's a cool move, and it's a good move, I think, on like the amateur level. There is a trap involved here. D4 kind of offers up the pawn on e4, and if they take the pawn on e4, like knight takes e4, queen h5 check is completely winning. The point is that the knight on e4 is hanging. So like queen h5 check, g6, queen to d5, and then we grab the knight. We play queen takes e4, and we're up a pawn, and of course black's king position is still pretty terrible, so obviously white has a huge advantage here. But, of course, they don't have to take the pawn on e4. And as a matter of fact, the move that gives this the most headaches is this move pawn to c5. And this move has just been thought to either completely equalize or possibly be as much as slight edge black, sort of for the longest time. But that still hasn't prevented, top-level players at least from giving this a shot. So, I mean, dc5 is kind of known to be really not so hot. But Magnus Carlsen gave this position a shot, and he tried this move knight c3, which is kind of clever. It's sort of like playing knight c3 by transposition. So after dc4, his idea was bishop c4 check, king e8, and then queen takes d4. And of course, he's got compensation for the material in terms of the fact that this king can't move, and he's got two pawns for the piece. And Carlsen tried this against Yu Yang Yi in St. Louis in 2019. But Carlsen lost this game with white. So even though he tried this and it looks really promising, he still couldn't pull off a win. After knight c6, queen e3, queen b6, queen g3, knight d4, castles, bishop to e6, Carlsen could have maintained an equal position with the move bishop d3, and the position should still be roughly level. The weak king versus the extra central pawns and the much cleaner position for white, even though white's down a piece. These things should still level out after bishop to d3. But apparently Carlsen's move bishop e6, which is extremely natural to try to weaken up the light squares and go after the weak position of the black king, was apparently a mistake, and he was unable to recover from it. After knight e6, we had knight d5, queen c6, takes, and every instinct should tell you that black's king is somehow accessible, and somehow it isn't. So we have queen g4, king e7, bishop d2, h5, and white just never quite had enough to break through after just a series of incredibly accurate moves from black. This is just another incredibly accurate move, just being incredibly clever. Of course, the bishop on h6, can't be taken because, we're going to be smashing through with an attack against the white king. So it's just all of these factors adding up. An attempt was made, bishop f6 or h8, bishop f4, but eventually Magnus ended up toast in this position, knight g2, and knight e3, and Magnus had to resign. So if the world champion isn't pulling it off, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. It just means that it's very, very dangerous. And the positions have to be very, very precise. So the way that I was always told was a little bit better was to play knight c3 first, and of course we've seen this in a bunch of different games. They can even just play c5 right away. This actually happened between Topalov and Kramnik and Linares in 1999. So Topalov gave this a shot. We had bishop c4, bishop e6, takes, and of course the king's position is very weak. So again, this is the idea, sort of similar to the Carlsen game. We're going to play d4 and if cd4, queen d4. But now Kramnik is trying to retreat his king and get this king back to safety. So king f7, we have dc5, taking the material, knight c6, queen e2, and all these moves seem pretty reasonable. Queen d7. Now this bishop e3 turns out might be a mistake from white. Maybe a little bit better. His castle's kingside and the position is unclear. But as it was, after bishop e3, Topalov's position wasn't terrible, and this game actually ended in a draw. So, we're not necessarily going to lose just because we're down a piece again. These factors should even out in the scheme of things, but these positions are incredibly dynamic. White has huge amounts of central control and huge amounts of development in exchange for black's loose king, in exchange for the fact that white is in fact down a piece. So it's a very interesting piece sacrifice. So another way this can go is something like g6, and then we could play d4, king g7. This was something that happened in a Vasily Ivanchuk game, and Ivanchuk actually got a really, really good position with the white pieces, and then managed to lose, which just shows you how sharp these positions are. The whole thing is after he played bishop e3, which was very good, knight g4, bishop f4, bishop e7, queen d2, rook f8, bishop e2, g5, bishop g3. All these moves are well and good. Knight c6. White played the move knight d5, which on the surface doesn't look like a bad move, but it turns out that it is, and this allowed black to consolidate and end up with an okay position. If white had found the move, this really simple move, pawn to h3, just kicking this knight back, and then say knight f6, d5, this position is just advantage white. It's very difficult for black to hold this together. The pawn on g5 is still hanging, the king on g7 is still loose, etc. Giving black that one extra move just to play the move pawn to h6 allowed black to solidify his position, and then eventually black went on to win. So these positions in the Cochrane Gambit are very, very sharp, very, very dicey. They can go either way. I'm not exactly sure which move I would recommend, either d4 or knight c3. I think playing d4 with the idea of transposing into the knight c3 lines is acceptable. But of course, playing d4 and not following it up with knight c3 against c5 is probably not acceptable. So against c5, I would definitely go the route that Magnus Carlsen went, and I would try to just kind of transpose, just play something like knight c3, dc5, bishop c4 check, if you want to go the d4 route, and allow for that trap with knight takes e4, queen h5. If you just want to just play a solid position where you know that you have chances, and the position is somewhat unclear, I would go with the move knight c3. But the Cochrane Gambit, fun opening that you can play with white to try to get a really imbalanced position where you have attacking chances against the loose black king. And the theory, and it doesn't hate it, and the computer is confused by it. So it's definitely something worth playing. So I hope you can use some of these ideas in your own games. Hope you learned something new about chess. Thank you very much for watching.